If you know me, you know I'm a huge fan of Nintendo and their games. They've always been what has inspired me to make games in the first place. That's why earlier this week, I decided to give myself the challenge of creating a Nintendo prototype game within a week. However, at first I really wasn't sure what I wanted to make. I did know I wanted to make something that was outside of my comfort zone, so that way I could actually learn something from this experience. I then suddenly remembered a video by 64bits about a Paper Zelda concept. I went back and watched it, and I immediately knew what I wanted to make. So the first thing I did for this project was actually creating the player model for the game. So when I first began making the player model, I kept referencing the 64bits video a lot during the process, and I ended up with a model that looked like this. I drew all of the art assets for Link within Procreate on my iPad, and I sent them to my computer to put into Unity. However, maybe I got a nittle ahead of myself because before I could actually use this model, I needed to create a player movement system first. I first followed the Bracky's video on third-person movement, and after finishing the tutorial, I found that what he made me build wasn't exactly what I was looking for this project. So I went back to the Thousand Year Door and looked up gameplay of how movement worked in that game. And while I was paying attention to it, I remembered how the layout of the world looked, I remembered how the camera worked in that game, and I remembered how the player moved. So I then went to another tutorial and built another player movement system, but more focused closer to what I wanted out of it. And it ended up actually turning out pretty good. I then took all the pieces for Link and rigged them onto this model I made. After rigging the player model, I then was able to move on to actually animating Link. And actually these animations were really simple to make. And that's partly because I used a similar animating style to what I did for a couple of my enemies in my game Niko and the Cubicers. It's coming out fall 2021 on Steam and Xbox. Please wishlist today. Please, 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 please. And it was really simple to get this model working. And boom, Paper Link was done. After that, I began working on the Rupee System. I looked up the wiki for Wind Waker and found what each rupee was worth in the game, and then I made each rupee in the paper style. I then had to build a counter for the game, and it was honestly probably the most interesting challenge for me. Not even because it was necessarily difficult, but it was something that I haven't done before. Being, I always wanted 4 digits to display on the counter rather than only displaying 1 digit when I only had 1 rupee, or only 2 when I had 10 or so on. It's really not very interesting to explain the solution I came up with, but to just explain it super quickly, basically it checks how many digits the rupee count is, and if it doesn't match up to 4, it'll add as many zeros to make the digit 4. And surprisingly, I made it this far through the process without actually deciding what area I wanted to make. I thought a little bit about what I wanted to recreate in the paper style, and I ended up landing on Outset Island from the Wind Waker. However, I didn't want to copy exactly how it looked from the original game for 2 reasons. One, I didn't think it fit the paper style just to fully recreate it the same way. I wanted to make the island layout look very similar to how a Paper Mario game would have looked. And along with that, how the original layout for the Wind Waker is, you really need to be able to have a controllable camera, which for how the Paper Mario style works with a locked camera, this wasn't going to work. So I very quickly started referencing the original island in Wind Waker, which thankfully, since it is the first island in the game, I could easily boot up a new save for the game and start looking around for myself. The biggest challenge that I kinda somehow managed to forget when I started this project was that I don't know anything about 3D modeling. I have attempted learning Blender in the past, and I was never too satisfied with the results. That's why when I started building this island, I decided to use something that was completely new to me, being Unity's Pro Builder system. This system was a lot easier for me to understand, and from what I saw, it looked like I could build everything I needed within Unity itself. Sure, learning to use Blender would have had a more polished effect on the entire project, but with the time restraint I had to build this within 1 week, it ended up being better to use Pro Builder because I learned another tool within Unity without having to waste extra time learning Blender during this 1 week process. And very quickly, the locales of Outset Island began to become more recognizable as I built more. The last big challenge for me was learning how to texture as well, which I did kinda learn how to, but it wasn't super polished in the end, unfortunately. It didn't turn out awfully. I tried doing like a paper-like texture for all the island assets, but it didn't look right, unfortunately, and I'm not really sure how I could have made it any better. I kept trying to mess around with it, and the result I have here is kind of just the best that I ended up getting. I would love to put more time into learning texturing in the future, so when I do make more projects like this, I can make it look even more polished. But once again, for the time restraint I gave myself, this was the most that I was able to get out of it. After that, I decided to put a bit more time into polishing, decided to put a few more extra details around the island, add a few more NPCs, and this is how the final result turned out. It is a pretty simple tech demo, all things considered. I didn't get to do everything I wanted to during the week. One being, I didn't build all of Outset, I only was able to build the base of Outset. I wanted to add more features like being able to talk to NPCs, and the one that I really wanted to do was actually make a battle system for this game. And honestly, I would love to return to this tech demo and build more of it for you guys. If this video can hit 50 likes, I will come back and build the rest of Outset and make the entire battle system for the game. However, I will also note that I will never be able to make this game publicly available because, of course, copyright issues with Nintendo. This was honestly more just a fun project I wanted to learn from more than anything. So I've never meant to have this end up being a playable project for you guys, but it is worth mentioning that don't expect this to ever be available to download. However, if you would like to know something that will be available for download that I'm working on, it is my Steam game, Niko and the Cubic Curse, launching later this year on Steam and Xbox. I would really appreciate it if everyone watching this video all the way to the end is able to go to Steam and wishlist it for me. Getting those wishlist numbers up does help me a ton, and I would really appreciate it. Honestly, I'm not really sure how to end this video, so, Scott the Was?